Hi, I have nothing to say. Or at least if Gail had asked me to do this 10 years ago, I would have told her I had nothing to say. I'm Tamara Fuller, and 10 years later, I do have something to say, and I'm very happy to be with you today. Let me tell you a little bit of a story. 10 years ago, I had made a really bad business decision and lost $13 million of my own cash. I was confused, I was insecure, I was broke, and I felt so tied up in what I thought I should be and what I had been. I was desperate in my quest to be happy. And I made a promise to myself then that I would only choose a profession in which I was happy. I found a profession in jazz that I loved. But this happiness thing was elusive for me. So, over the last 10 years, um, I have learned a great deal about being happy. And I can say today that I am a happy jazz club owner, amongst other things. But I had a lot of help on the way. And that help came in the form mostly of jazz artists who have crossed our threshold and performed on our stage at the Velvet Note. So, what I'd like to share with you today is just a little bit about a few of those jazz artists and what I learned from them and the help that I've received from them over the years. So if you're interested in jazz, you're interested in business, you're interested in happiness, this is the talk for you. I'd like to start with Dave Weckl. Dave is a jazz drummer who is also a previous member of the Chick Corea Electric Band, the acoustic band. He's played with everybody from Robert Plant to Paul Simon, to name a few. And when he got to the Velvet Note, he was, as we all know him to be, quite prickly. And I have to tell you, I was very intimidated by him and pretty scared. But I asked him while he was there if he would do me the favor of sitting down for an interview. And he did, right on our sofa, front row center. And I said, Dave, I'm not going to ask you anything about drums or about jazz. And he said, phew, that is a relief. I said, but there is one thing I'd like to know from you. You've played with so many famous people, highly regarded, accomplished, and you yourself are one as well. Are you happy? And if you are, how do you know? And he thought about it for a while and he said, yes, the people I know who are happy in jazz, and myself included, think of it as the air that we would breathe, that we breathe. We can't imagine doing anything else. And this is really the first lesson that I learned, which is that I'm responsible for my own happiness. It is, and I take this with pride, the most selfish decision that I have ever made in my life, to pursue and be committed to my own happiness. And jazz artists, I think, are perfect examples of that. An artist has to be self-motivated. He's got to start with himself, and he's got to keep himself going. He has to be self-directed. He has to work to achieve his own values, and he has to exercise his own command of his own life. There's nobody there to say, you should do this, get up at this time, that sort of thing. She has to be her own boss, if you will. And in watching jazz artists, I've learned that I can put together a life that is happy, and it's up to me to do that. I can create it myself. I can put in my own rewards. It may not necessarily be money, or certainly not fame, which a lot of jazz artists know possibly may never come, depending on how long you work and how hard you work. You may achieve some of that, but not all of it. I know jazz artists who will play for $1 million and many, many who will play for nothing. But it's all about that self motivation. And I'm happy to say that not looking to the world and exterior issues or circumstances, but looking to build that for myself has been very, very helpful. I saw a lot of that example from the jazz artists who have come to the Velvet Note. My second example is Kenny Garrett. If you don't know who he is, he's best known as a saxophonist. He played with both Duke Ellington Orchestra as well as Miles Davis. Also played with Chick Corea. He's a two-time Grammy winner and umpteenth time nominee. And he was here for a 3-night run. And he asked me on the morning of the third night if I would come to the club early and open up for him because he would like to do some work. I thought, come on, I would like I would like to do some work too, but I accommodated his needs, and he sat down in the corner and he took out some charts that he had been working on, and I sat in the opposite corner and just watched him. And from time to time, he would get up. The stage was all set because he was on a third night of a 3-night run. He would get up and he would play an instrument that's not the saxophone. And then he would write. And then he would play another instrument that's not the saxophone. And then he would write. Now, let me tell you something that most people don't know about Kenny Garrett. The instruments that are on his stage, other than the saxophone, he plays them as well as the people who play them on his gig. In some cases, better. And when he was done, he had a composition in which he had personally sat in the seat of every artist that was going to be on that stage, and he had played it from their perspective. The people I know who are most in tune and connected to their audiences are multi-instrumentalists. They keep their audience in mind. They keep their other performers in mind. They understand the other instruments on the stage and they can speak to them, have a musical conversation with them. And the illustration for me was whatever I do as a business person, as a leader, I need to keep the perspectives of the people I'm working with and the people I'm serving and the people I'm in business with and the people who pay me for the jazz club experience. I need to be able to stand in their shoes and keep them in mind and feel the way that they feel. And I believe that Kenny's multi-instrumentalist perspective is a huge contributor to how he approaches his work and the commitment that he has for creativity and innovation and feeling that vibe that his audiences feel. And I personally have found it helpful as I think about someone sitting in my club for 2 hours for a night out. What are they going to experience? What feels good to them? What is awkward for them? And I think it's one of the reasons why people keep coming back and again, and why I feel a sense of happiness and connectedness with people who come to us. It's not always the easiest thing, but stepping outside of myself and experiencing empathy has been helpful for me. The third example I want to mention is Carmen Lundy. Carmen is a jazz singer. She is a multimedia artist. She not only sings, but she also paints. She's been shown in high-level galleries. She is a television and a stage star. She also happens to be Curtis Lundy's sister. Um, she had a performance at the Velvet Note a few years ago, and her band arrived before she did. And they were going through the music as bands tend to do during sound check. And then she arrived, and she stepped over the threshold. And the moment she entered the club, she called out a very highly accomplished musician on her gig and said, "You are not playing that right. You don't know the music." And she was right. But at the time, I couldn't believe that the words were coming out of her mouth. And just as I picked my jaw up off the floor, she turned to me and said, "Your piano is out of tune. If you're going to accomplish what I think you want to accomplish here, I don't care how much money you have or do not have, you must keep your piano in tune." Now, this all happened in the first minute that she was in the building. And it took me aback. But she was right. And by the time she left, I could not stop hugging her. I didn't want her to go because she showed me the embodiment of someone with impeccable standards who's not voicing her correction because she wants to boss people around or humiliate them, but because she wants to lift up the group that she's in and the situation that she's in and the performance that she's in and the people who are hosting her, and she wants them to be the best they can be. And I frankly had not seen that level of straightforwardness in a woman. And it showed me something that I hadn't seen before. And it showed me that I could do it. She is highly regarded for not only her singing ability, but also the fact that she's a real musician. Musicians say she's not just there to sing. She really understands the music. She is a musician herself. And she knew that she was right, and she didn't waste any time getting her group up to the level that they needed to be for that performance. I didn't waste any time. I didn't call a piano tuner the next day. I called a piano tuner right then and had the piano tuned and made sure that we have that done on a regular basis. And I learned that from Carmen Lundy, and I will never forget it. When you're happy with what you're doing, you want to surround yourself with people who are doing their absolute best, and you cherish your relationships with people who are the best that you can find. And you want to maintain that, and you want to lift it up, and you want to keep it going. And it's not doing yourself or anybody else a favor to let your standards slip. And I learned that from Carmen Lundy. My next example is Freddie Cole. Freddie Cole is Nat King Cole's younger brother. He has over 40 recordings himself. He actually wanted to be an athlete first in life, but an injury that he sustained in college, or I think it may have been in football, high school football, made that impossible. He could have been an incredible copy, if you will, a mimic of his brother, who was like the most famous jazz singer forever. But just he could have made a whole career off of singing his brother's songs. But he chose not to. He chose to be himself. I remember him for his gravelly, imperfect voice and for um, his silence and the way that he would cut it spontaneously, it seemed, with a razor sharp comment that would have you thinking or laughing or both. He had a way of not getting too spun up about anything. Um, he was elegant, and I mean programmer's elegance, just enough, not too much, in the way he spoke and in the way he sang and in the way he played the piano. But mostly what I remember about Freddie, and he died last year, I remember that he had genuine friendships. Um, he would come out to the club, he would call ahead, and he'd say, I hear you have so and so. Well, I'm going to just come out and see him. And I would always fit him in. And whether he knew them or not, he would come out just to support an artist. And it didn't have to be a pianist, but someone whose music he thought he would enjoy. He had people who came to see him for every show that he ever did at the Velvet Note because they considered him to be not just a great artist, but considered him to be a friend. Um, he would call me on holidays, and that was the time I would hear from him. He just wanted to talk and just wanted to listen and find out how I was doing. Not because he wanted to book a show, not because he wanted anything from me. He just wanted to know how I was doing. And that level of authenticity and real friendship and connection is something that you can't fake. And what I learned from Freddie was that your brand begins with you being yourself, not trying to be a great copy of someone else, despite how great that someone else might be. But in order to have a real lasting brand, you have to first distinguish yourself by being completely and authentically you, whatever that is. And then you'll have the possibilities and the opportunities that are tied with your brand because people will know who you are. It is so much fun for me, at this point in my life, and also for the club to just be who we are. We're not the biggest club. Uh, we don't have a ladies' night. we, um, but we are just who we are, and sometimes it's a little rough and around the edges, but people know what they're going to get, and they know what makes us different, and that makes a difference for us, I think. And I think the same thing for me. Um, the last example that I want to use is the great trumpeter Lou Soloff. Lou Soloff played with Tito Puente and Maynard Ferguson and a whole bunch of other folks. I mean, the albums that he had as um, a contributor through his own band, but also a contributor to others, probably exceed 100. But he's probably best known for laying down that incredible trumpet solo in the song Spinning Wheel that was performed by Blood, Sweat, and Tears. And he was with Blood, Sweat, and Tears for 5 years. And Lou once told me something that most people don't know, which is Blood, Sweat, and Tears once did a very successful Asian and European tour. And I mean, it was grueling. I mean, the dates were just packed in there. People were going bananas over them, um, shaking their tour bus, everything you could possibly think of. It was almost like the Beatles. And they got home and their money, their earnings had been stolen by their management. And they were devastated. And in that moment, Lou learned to not have expectations. And that's how he lived his life. The first time he played at the Velvet Note, he played 4 times. But the first weekend he played at the Velvet Note, he found the absolute best musicians he could, and he didn't develop a set list. He just got on the stage with them, and they played whatever they wanted to play. And for the musicians he played with and for himself, they all agreed that it was the time of their life. And these are musicians very highly accomplished, but the tunes they decided to play and the manner in which they improvised on those tunes was just whatever they wanted to do, whatever made them happy. He would go out in Manhattan at like 11 o'clock at night, and he would find a session that he could join, a jam session or somebody's show, and he would just go and jam with them. And he loved doing that, especially on weekends. And when he would come home, he would call me. And it was like 2 o'clock 3 o'clock in the morning. I'm like, Lou, why are you calling me? He's like, because you're the only person up at this time. I just got back. I'm so wired. I got to talk to somebody. And he just had so much fun doing that. He never let protocol get in the way of doing what made him happy. One of the things that I want you to know is that as you become more and more yourself, either more successful, more longevity, more expectations for your business, at least for me, I've experienced a battle between structure and improvisation. Doing what I think is expected of me and doing what is really joyful for me in that moment. And I work to try to not let my leadership impede my happiness. You'll see me, in addition to being the owner of the Velvet Note, I'm also the executive chef. But for every show, I come out from behind that back of house and I come out and I stand in the place of a guest and I at least enjoy one song from the perspective of the guest and fully throw myself into that because I love performances. I love experiencing them as a guest. And I'm not going to let all the things that I have to do stand in the way of that. So letting myself go and letting myself flow and not being too structured to do that and to relax and enjoy what I've earned has been helpful. Lou died in 2015. He was coming out of a restaurant celebrating his birthday with the people he loved the most. And he had a heart attack. But I know that the last thing that he was doing before that was what he loved to do. He traveled from New York City to the Velvet Note 4 times to play with us. And every time he came, he performed his butt off. And he asked me nothing about money. Zero. He did not ask me what I was going to pay him. He did not do a contract. He just came and played. And at the end of every weekend that he was here, I handed him an envelope with a check inside. And he would always open up the envelope in front of me. And he would look inside and he would say, "Thank you. I had fun. And this was more than I expected." So what I wish for you is that you will have the pleasure and the privilege of shaping the world in your own vision, that you are able to be authentically you as bravely and courageously as you can, that you will learn the fine art of expecting nothing while at the same time asking for everything and letting yourself feel the happiness and the joy that you deserve. Thank you for having me.
Tamara, I want to ask you one question that someone put in the comments
Okay.
about whether or not you have an initiative to increase your booking percentages to include more women. Is that something you've given any thought to?
Um, I wouldn't say specifically. I don't think that it's a percentages issue. Um, it just so happens that about 20, I think somewhere between 20 and 25% of the bookings that we have are headlined by women. I haven't committed myself to a 50-50 split. I've committed myself to finding the best artists who want to play at the Velvet Note. And so I have, there are some months when I have almost all women on our docket, and there's some months when I have almost none. Um, However, I would say that if you know of women who would like to play at the Velvet Note, please be in contact with me. There are wonderful women in jazz, and some even on Gail's roster, like Jasmia Horn, for example, who's played here. But a lot of them are really tough to get. People love to see women on stage and hear them, and sometimes the pursuit can be a little challenging. But if you can think of someone that we have missed, I would love to hear from you.
Thank you.
Thank you.